Sometimes the moments that define our lives arrive disguised as small accidents. The hot coffee spilled in slow motion over the Italian suit, staining the charcoal grey fabric with dark liquid that seemed to spread like a metaphor for everything that was about to change. She held her breath, the tray trembling in her hands, waiting for the burst of fury that always followed this kind of disaster. But it didn't come. The man, with his 38 years marked in the fine lines around eyes that had seen too much, simply looked up and smiled. But it wasn't an ordinary smile. It was a smile tinged with such deep sadness that she felt something in her chest tighten painfully. "It's okay," he said with a soft voice that contrasted with his impeccable appearance. Really, it's okay. She, at 32 years old, had worked in that small seaside restaurant for 8 years. She had seen everything: furious customers, rude tourists, demanding bosses, but she had never seen someone respond to a disaster with such kindness. That unexpected gentleness, in the midst of a busy morning's chaos, marked the beginning of a story that neither of them could have imagined. The Sea Breeze restaurant always smelled of freshly brewed coffee, mixed with the salty aroma of the ocean that entered through open windows. The sun-bleached wooden walls told stories of decades of service, and the constant sound of waves breaking against nearby rocks provided a comforting soundtrack to the endless workdays. She hurried to find napkins, her hands moving with the efficiency of years of practice, while muttering hurried apologies. The man stopped her with a gentle gesture of his hand. "Really?" he repeated. "I needed a reason not to go to that meeting anyway." It was then that she really looked at him. It wasn't just his expensive clothes or his watch that probably cost more than her annual salary. It was the way his shoulders dropped slightly, as if he carried an invisible weight. It was the way his deep hazel eyes looked toward the sea through the window, with something like nostalgia for something he had never had. "Let me at least pay for the dry cleaning," she insisted, mentally calculating how many extra hours she would need to work. He shook his head. "How about you just bring me another coffee, and this time I promise not to move when you approach." There was something in his tone, a soft and tired humor that made her smile despite her mortification. When she returned with the coffee, walking with exaggerated care that made him laugh genuinely, he was looking at the menu. "What do you recommend?" he asked. "The almond croissant is freshly made," she responded automatically. He ordered it, though when it arrived he barely touched it. He simply drank his coffee in silence, watching the sea, lost in thoughts that seemed to weigh tons. That night, as she closed the restaurant after her second shift, she also worked as a kitchen assistant 3 nights a week at a downtown restaurant. She couldn't stop thinking about that man, about his incomprehensible kindness, about his palpable sadness, about how for a brief moment she had felt she saw something of herself reflected in his tired eyes. Everyone knew her by 3 characteristics that defined her essence: an unshakable persistence that made her wake up at 5 in the morning every day, no matter how exhausted she was, a unique ability to find beauty in simple things: the smell of fresh coffee, the sound of waves, the way dawnlight painted the sky pink and gold, and a contagious optimism that brightened even the greyest days of her co-workers. "Good morning, sunshine," she always said to Rosa, the 55-year-old cook who had been more of a mother to her than her own absent mother. "Ready to conquer another day?" Rosa always responded with an affectionate grunt, but smiled. Everyone smiled around her. It was impossible not to. But what no one saw, what she guarded jealously in the deepest part of her heart, was the conflict that tore at her every night when she finally arrived at her small 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building without an elevator. On her table, under a pile of bills, was a crumpled brochure from the local university, Interior Design Program. She looked at it every night before sleeping, the photographs of beautifully designed spaces mocking her hands cracked from dishwater. She felt like a traitor to her own dreams. Every day she accepted her life of survival. Every time she said, "I can't afford it," or "maybe next year," she felt a part of her soul wither a little more. But what other option did she have? Dreams didn't pay rent. Dreams didn't buy food. Dreams didn't help her younger brother with his university expenses in another city. The man in the stained suit returned the next day, And the next. And the next. Always at the same time, 8:30 in the morning, always ordering the same thing. Black coffee and a croissant he barely touched. He sat at the same table by the window, watching the sea as if the waves could give him the answers he sought. At first their interactions were brief. Good morning. His order. Thank you. But gradually conversations began to develop. Small ones at first. About the weather. About how busy the restaurant was. About how the seagulls were getting bolder each season. Do you always work here? He asked one morning in the second week. 8 years, she responded, cleaning the table next to his. I started when I was 24. I thought it would be temporary, just until I could save for college. She laughed, a slightly bitter sound. Temporary plans have a habit of becoming permanent. He nodded with an understanding that seemed very personal. I understand that. I took over my father's business 3 years ago thinking it would be temporary too, just until things stabilized. But here I am, and temporary has become my whole life. What business? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Hotels, he responded simply. A chain of them. My father built them from scratch, went from having a small inn to owning a dozen luxury properties. When he died, someone had to keep it running. There was something in the way he said it. Someone had to, that revealed everything he wasn't saying. The weight of legacy, the obligation, the sacrifice of his own life on the altar of another's expectations. And is that what you want to do? She asked softly. Hotels? He looked at her, surprised by the direct question. No one asked him that. Everyone assumed anyone would be grateful to inherit an empire. I don't know, he finally admitted. I used to want to be an architect, design buildings that told stories, but that was a long time ago. Now I just want to... He stopped, searching for the right words. Keep his memory alive. Prove to myself that I can do this, that I won't fail at the only thing he entrusted to me. She felt something in her chest resonate with those words. She understood that pressure, that fear of failure that paralyzes you, that feeling of being trapped between what you should do and what you yearn for. I think your father would be proud that you're trying, she finally said, though I think he'd also want you to be happy. He smiled, but it was a sad smile. Parents want many things. Sometimes those things conflict. After he left that day, Rosa approached while she cleaned the table. Be careful, girl, the older woman warned. Men like him come from a different world, a world that devours girls like you. We're just talking, she protested. Rosa touched her cheek tenderly. That's how it always starts. With talking. Then you wake up one day and realize you gave your heart to someone who lives in a different galaxy from yours. But it was too late for warnings, because she was already looking forward to each morning with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years, already finding herself thinking of things to tell him, already searching for his face in the crowd of customers, already falling, though neither of them would admit it yet. It was in the third week when he made the proposal that would alter the course of both their lives. It was a Wednesday morning, the clear sky promising a beautiful day, when he entered with a different expression. There was determination in his eyes, mixed with something like nervous hope. I need to ask you a question, he said, after she brought him his usual coffee. And I know it's going to sound strange, but please hear me out completely before you answer. She sat in the opposite chair, intrigued by his seriousness. The restaurant was relatively quiet at that hour, only a few regular customers reading newspapers in the corners. I'm organizing a charity event at my main hotel, he began. It's for a local arts foundation. But the person who was coordinating it had to resign due to a family emergency, and the event is in 6 weeks. He paused, as if gathering courage. I've been watching you here, the way you handle the chaos of lunch hour, how you coordinate with the kitchen, how you make every customer feel special even when you're overwhelmed. You have a gift for this. She blinked, not fully understanding where this was going. I want to offer you the position of event coordinator, he finally said. I know you don't have formal experience in events of this scale, but I've interviewed 5 professionals, and they were all soulless, empty. They wanted to impress, but didn't touch the heart of what a charity event should be. You understand, people, that's more valuable than any degree. Her heart was beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. How much does it pay? She asked, always practical even in the midst of her shock. He named a figure that was 3 times what she earned in a full month working both jobs. "It's crazy," she murmured. "I don't know anything about high-level events. I don't know fancy vendors. I don't know how to deal with rich people. I'd probably ruin everything." "Or maybe," he said softly, "you'd create something authentic, something real, something that actually matters." Rosa, who had been listening from the bar without hiding it, approached with crossed arms. "And what about her job here? I can't lose my best waitress for 6 weeks. He looked at Rosa directly. "I'll pay her double her salary during that period if you let her go. And when it's over, she can come back if she wants." Rosa narrowed her eyes. "It's not a question of money. It's a question of protecting this girl. She comes from people like you, from the world of luxury and lies. They're going to chew her up and spit her out." "You're right to be suspicious," he admitted. "But I'm not trying to hurt her. I'm trying to give her an opportunity, something I wish someone had given me years ago." There was something in his voice, a raw vulnerability, that made Rosa pause. She looked between the two of them for a long moment. "If you accept," she finally said to her, "promise me one thing. Promise me you won't lose who you are in that shiny world. Promise me you'll remember where you come from." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "I promise." That night, alone in her apartment, she took out the interior design brochure from under the bills. 6 weeks. A salary that could cover a full semester of classes. An opportunity to see how something beautiful was planned and executed. But more than that, it was an opportunity to prove, to herself more than anyone, that she was capable of more. That her dreams weren't completely dead. That maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the endless cycle of survival. She accepted the next day, her hands trembling as she shook his to seal the deal. She had no idea she had just taken the first step toward discovering both her own heart and the devastating secrets he was hiding behind his perfect facade. The first day at the hotel was a brutal immersion into a world she had only seen in magazines. The Grand Oceanic rose 20 floors above the boardwalk, all glass and polished steel that reflected the sky like a giant mirror. The lobby smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers, with enormous arrangements of white orchids adorning every surface. The marble floor was so polished she could see her distorted reflection, constantly reminding her how out of place she was. She had worn her best clothes, a simple black dress and flat shoes she had bought on sale years ago, but still felt like an imposter among the hotel staff in their impeccable uniforms and the guests in their designer outfits. "Follow me," he said, appearing at her side in his usual perfect suit. "I'll show you your office." He took her to an upper floor, where he had assigned her a small office with an ocean view. It was bigger than her living room at home. It had a dark wood desk, a state-of-the-art computer, and a wall full of file cabinets containing information about previous events. "Everything you need is here," he explained. "Budgets, lists of previous vendors, contacts. My assistant, Clara, will help you with whatever you need. And he hesitated, "I'll be available too." She touched the desk reverently, trying to process that this space was hers, at least temporarily. "There's something else you should know," he said, his tone becoming serious. "My family, especially my sister Patricia, she's complicated, very protective, and she has strong opinions about who should be involved in the family business." As if summoned, the door burst open and a 29-year-old woman entered. Patricia was everything she wasn't: tall, slender, dressed in a white tailored suit that probably cost more than a year's rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a bun so perfect it looked painful, and her blue eyes, so similar to her brother's but without his warmth, scanned her from top to bottom with barely disguised disdain. "So you're the waitress," she said, not bothering with introductions. "Santiago told me about his experiment." "Patricia," he warned, his voice taking on a steel tone. "She has a name." "Of course," Patricia said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What's your name, dear?" "Maria," she responded, lifting her chin. "Maria Elena Santos." "Well, Maria Elena Santos," Patricia leaned against the doorframe, "I hope you understand the importance of this event. Our reputation is at stake. We have no room for sentimental experiments. That's enough, Santiago said firmly. Maria is here because she's capable and because I trust her vision. If you have problems with that, you can discuss it with me in private. Patricia looked at him for a long moment before smiling coldly. Oh, we will. Definitely will. She left, leaving a tense silence in her wake. I'm sorry, Santiago said, running a hand through his hair. She's not a bad person, she's just protective of what's hers, Maria completed. I understand. And she's probably right to worry. I don't have credentials, I don't have experience, I'm a risk. You're an opportunity, he corrected. There's a difference. The first days were exhausting. Maria stayed late studying files, making lists, researching online everything she could about high-level event planning. She discovered her first real obstacle when she started contacting vendors from the approved list. Miss Santos, invariably said the voice on the other end of the phone, with that polite tone that barely hid disdain. I don't think we've worked with you before. Could you give me references? She had no references. Not in this world. I'm working directly with Santiago Rivera of the Grand Oceanic, she responded, hating how defensive she sounded. I see. And you are his assistant? The term hung in the air, loaded with implications that made her feel small. Every phone call was a battle. Every meeting a minefield of terms she didn't fully understand. Floral arrangements, canapés, vintage versus contemporary themes, words that people in this world threw around casually, but that for her required nightly Google searches. She compensated by working harder than anyone. She stayed in the office until midnight, arrived before dawn. She practiced her speaking manner in front of her apartment mirror, trying to sound more sophisticated. She watched YouTube videos about event etiquette. She read luxury magazines at the newsstand without buying them, because she couldn't afford the expense. But the worst came 2 weeks later, during a meeting with potential sponsors in the hotel's executive suite. The room smelled of expensive leather and aged whiskey. The 5 men and 2 women sitting around the conference table represented some of the largest companies in the region. Patricia was there too, watching with hawk eyes. Maria presented her vision for the event. Instead of the usual elegant and cold gala, she proposed something warmer. Live local music, community artists exhibiting their work, an auction that would include both luxury pieces and works by emerging artists. It's quaint, said one of the men, his tone making it clear that quaint wasn't a compliment. But our clients expect a certain level of, how to say it, exclusivity. Authenticity doesn't have to exclude elegance, Maria argued, her heart beating hard. In fact, I think people are hungry for real experiences, tired of events that are all the same. Maybe, Patricia intervened softly, dangerously. But with all due respect, Miss Santos, what exactly is your experience in events of this scale? I see in your resume that you organized small employee parties at a restaurant. The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to Maria, waiting. The moment of truth had arrived. She could admit she had exaggerated her experience in the initial resume. She could acknowledge she was completely out of her league. Or she could fight. I don't have experience in events of this scale, she finally said, her voice surprisingly firm. It's true, what I do have is 8 years of experience making people feel welcome, in creating memorable experiences with minimal budgets, in finding beauty in the simple and making it shine. If that's not enough for you, I understand, but I think you're underestimating the value of real human connection over superficial prestige. One of the sponsors, an older man with grey hair and penetrating eyes, leaned forward. Santiago, he said, without taking his gaze from Maria, I think you've found something special here, or someone special. I'm not sure which. The meeting ended without definitive commitments, but also without direct rejections. When everyone left, Santiago found Maria in her office, her head in her hands. I ruined it, she murmured. I gave them reasons to doubt. You gave them reasons to believe, he corrected, sitting on the edge of her desk. Maria, you could have lied, you could have inflated your experience or faked confidence you didn't feel, but you chose honesty. You chose to be yourself. That takes more courage than any impressive resume. She looked up, meeting his eyes. There was something in the way he looked at her, with respect, with admiration, with something deeper she didn't dare name, that made her chest tighten. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Why did you really give me this opportunity?" He was silent for a long moment, looking out the window toward the dark ocean. "Because," he finally said, "when I look at you, I see someone who still believes it's possible to be both, successful and authentic, and I needed someone to remind me that exists, that I don't have to lose my soul to keep my father's legacy alive." It was in that moment, in that small office overlooking the sea, that Maria realized a terrifying truth. She was no longer doing this just for the money or the opportunity. She was doing it for him, because she wanted to prove he was right to believe in her, because she wanted to be the person he saw when he looked at her like that. And that realization scared her more than any meeting with sponsors, because she knew with absolute certainty that she was entering dangerous territory from which she might never be able to return. It was during one of those long nights, when all the staff had gone and only they remained on the executive floor, that Maria made a discovery that would change everything. They had been reviewing budgets, sitting side by side in her office, their shoulders almost touching as they leaned over the computer. The clock read 11 at night, and the building was silent, except for the distant hum of air conditioning and the muffled sound of the ocean outside. "I need to use the bathroom," Maria announced, standing and stretching. "Can you check the catering quotes in the meantime?" Santiago nodded distractedly, already absorbed in the numbers on the screen. When Maria returned 5 minutes later, she stopped dead in the doorway. Santiago was standing in front of the window, a stack of papers in his hand, and his face completely pale. He hadn't heard her enter. "Santiago?" she asked softly. He turned sharply, and for a moment she saw pure panic in his eyes before he masked it. "These documents," Maria said, pointing to the papers he was holding. "They were on your desk. They fell when the wind came through the open window. I just picked them up and—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat, because she had seen them. Financial reports, bank statements, all marked in red, numbers that even she, without business training, could recognize as devastating. The Grand Oceanic and the other hotels in the Rivera chain were on the verge of bankruptcy. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Santiago dropped the papers on the desk and ran both hands through his hair, a gesture she had come to associate with his extreme stress. 3 years, he finally admitted. "Since my father died. He was a business genius. I'm just someone who's desperately trying to keep afloat a sinking ship." He dropped into the chair, and for the first time since she'd known him, Maria saw him completely stripped of his usual composure. He was just an exhausted, terrified, overwhelmed man. "The debts accumulated gradually at first," he continued, looking at his hands. "My father had made some risky investments right before he died, expansion projects that didn't work out, and I didn't see it in time. By the time I realized, it was too late. I've been using my personal money, selling assets, juggling payments, but it's like plugging holes in a dam with your fingers." "This charity event," Maria began, realization hitting her like a punch. "It's not just charity," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "It's my last chance to attract investors without having to publicly reveal how bad things really are. If I can prove we still have relevance in the community, that the Rivera brand still means something, maybe someone will be willing to inject capital before everything collapses." Maria sat slowly in the opposite chair, processing this information. Everything made sense now. His insistence on hiring someone authentic instead of an expensive event coordinator. His surprisingly modest budget for an event that was supposed to be high level. The way he drank his coffee every morning with that expression of a condemned man. "Does Patricia know?" she asked. "She knows things are tight, but not the real magnitude. No one knows. Except my accountant, my lawyer, and now you." A heavy silence filled the room. Through the window, Maria could see the city lights reflecting on the dark water of the ocean. "You should have told me," she finally said. "And what would you have done?" he asked, looking at her directly. "Would you have accepted the job knowing I might not be able to pay you in the end, knowing you were working to save something that's possibly already lost?" "I deserve to know the truth," she insisted, her voice firmer. I deserve to choose whether I want to help knowing all the facts. You're right, he admitted after a moment. I'm sorry, it's just that I've been lying for so long, keeping up this facade, that I forgot what it feels like to be honest. I forgot I could still trust someone. Maria stood and walked to the window, her thoughts spinning wildly. She could leave, she should leave. This was exactly the kind of situation Rosa had warned her about. Complicated, potentially disastrous, definitely above her level. But as she looked at her reflection in the dark glass, she saw something beyond her own doubts. She saw an opportunity, not just to save her event, but to create something that truly mattered. I have an idea, she said slowly, turning to face him. But you need to trust me completely. No micromanaging, no doubts. Can you do that? Santiago looked at her with a mixture of hope and skepticism. What kind of idea? The kind of idea that either saves us both or sinks us together, she responded. The kind of idea that requires us to stop pretending to be something we're not and start being truly authentic. There was a moment of silence, loaded with possibilities and unspoken promises. Okay, he finally said, I trust you. And with those 3 simple words, their relationship fundamentally changed. She was no longer employer and employee. They were accomplices, they were partners, they were 2 people on the edge of something neither of them dared to name yet. Maria spent that night in her apartment without sleeping, scribbling ideas in an old notebook. If the problem was that Santiago was trying to impress the wrong world with the wrong approach, then the solution was simple but radical: change the game completely. Instead of competing on the terrain of traditional luxury events, where they would always lose against hotels with more resources, they would create something unique, something that celebrated exactly what Santiago had been trying to hide: his roots, his community, his authenticity. But that would require something he hadn't yet been willing to do: be publicly vulnerable, admit they needed help, invite the community to be part of the solution instead of just impressed spectators. The next day, Maria arrived early with her notebook full and a determination that surprised even herself. I need to make calls, she told Santiago, but not to the vendors on your approved list, to mine. Yours? Fishermen, artisans, street musicians, the owner of the market where I buy vegetables, the lady who makes the best bread in town in her home kitchen, real people who create real things. Santiago looked uncertain. Maria, I'm not sure that's... What? She interrupted him. Sophisticated enough, impressive enough. Santiago, your whole problem is that you've been trying to be enough of everything except yourself. Maybe it's time to risk authenticity. It was a decisive moment. He could reject her idea, return to the safety of the traditional approach, or he could take a leap of faith. Slowly, very slowly, he nodded. Do it, he said. Make the calls. And so began a transformation that neither of them had anticipated. With each call Maria made, with each contact from her simple world that she brought to the project, the event began to take a shape that was completely different from anything the Riveras had done before. But it also awakened resistance that was about to explode in ways that would test not only their plan, but the fragile trust they were building between them. The first major confrontation came a week later, during what should have been a routine family update meeting. Patricia had called the meeting in her own office, larger and more ostentatious than Santiago's, with the excuse of coordinating efforts. But when Maria entered, nervously following Santiago, she immediately realized this was an ambush. Besides Patricia, there were 3 other people in the room. The hotel's general manager, a 45-year-old man named Ricardo with a poker face, the marketing director, an efficient 40-year-old woman named Sophia, and, to Maria's surprise, Santiago's ex-girlfriend. Valentina was exactly the type of woman Maria had imagined someone like Santiago would love: tall, elegant, with perfectly wavy brown hair falling over shoulders, clad in a cream-colored designer suit. Her green eyes evaluated Maria with a surgeon's precision, finding every flaw effortlessly. "So you're the famous Maria," Valentina said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Santiago has told me so much about you. Well, not that much, but enough to pique my curiosity." "Valentina," Santiago said, his voice tense, I didn't know you'd be here." "Patricia thought my perspective might be valuable," Valentina responded with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "After all, I organized events for the region's most prestigious brands for 5 years. When Patricia told me about the interesting decisions being made, I felt I should offer my expertise." Maria felt her stomach sink. This was going to be worse than she thought. Patricia immediately took control of the meeting, projecting images on a large screen. Maria's proposals alongside examples of previous Grand Oceanic events. "As you can see," Patricia began with a professional but cold tone, "there's a significant discrepancy between our established standard and the current direction." The images made it clear. Past events showed elaborate floral arrangements with imported orchids, Michelin-starred chefs preparing artistic canapés, string quartets playing in marble halls. Maria's proposals showed wicker baskets with local wildflowers, fishermen offering tastings of their daily catches, a folk music band. "It's not a discrepancy," Maria intervened, finding her voice. "It's an evolution." "An evolution?" Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Or a regression?" Ricardo, the manager, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "With all due respect, Miss Santos, some of these vendors don't have the level of insurance required for corporate events, and health regulations for serving fish prepared by local fishermen are manageable," Maria completed. "I already checked. All vendors can obtain temporary certifications, and the fishermen will work with our hotel kitchen staff, not independently." Valentina leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with something like cruel amusement. "Maria, honey, I understand you come from a more humble background, and there's something charming about your enthusiasm. But these events aren't neighborhood parties. Our guests expect a certain level of sophistication. They expect to feel special, exclusive. How do you achieve that with fishermen and wildflowers?" Maria felt rage beginning to burn in her chest, but kept her voice calm. "Maybe the problem is that we've confused exclusive with exclusionary. Maybe there's a way to make people feel special without making others feel small." "Charming philosophy," Patricia said dryly, "but it doesn't pay the bills. Santiago, you have to see reason here. This event is too important to experiment with." All eyes turned to Santiago, who had been unusually silent during the entire exchange. Maria could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "Santiago?" Patricia pressed. "Say something." He looked at Maria, then at his sister, then back at Maria. In his eyes she could see the battle, the part of him that wanted to yield to family pressure, to the safe and known, versus the part that wanted to believe in her vision, in the possibility of something different. "Continue, Maria," he finally said, his voice firm. "You have my support." The relief Maria felt lasted exactly 3 seconds until Patricia exploded. "This is ridiculous." Her perfect composure finally cracked. "Santiago, you're letting this waitress put at risk everything Dad worked for. Why? Because it makes you feel good about yourself? Because it makes you feel less guilty about failing?" The silence that followed was absolute. Santiago went pale. "Patricia," he began, but she wasn't finished. "Oh, you think I don't know? You think I don't see the financial reports? I know we're in trouble, Santiago, and instead of seeking professional help, instead of doing what needs to be done to save this place, you're playing saviors with someone who has no idea what she's doing." Maria stood up, her heart beating wildly. "I have a very clear idea of what I'm doing," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm trying to save something worth saving, not just a business, but the idea that we can be successful without losing our humanity, that we can create beauty without excluding the people who made us who we are." "How noble," Valentina said sarcastically. "But nobility doesn't save hotel empires." "Maybe not," Maria admitted. "But authenticity might. People are tired of the same old thing. They're hungry for real connections. And if we can't give them that, then maybe we deserve to fail." She left the office before anyone could respond, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She heard quick footsteps behind her in the hallway. "Maria, wait," Santiago's voice. She turned, and for the first time she saw something in his face she hadn't seen before, real fear of losing her, not as an event coordinator, as Maria. "Do you mean it?" she asked, Or are you just being polite? Because if Patricia's right, if I'm really putting everything at risk, then I need to know now." He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her. But instead, he took her hands. "I mean it," he said, his voice intense. "Maria, you see things I stopped seeing years ago. You see possibilities where I only see obstacles. You make me remember why my father loved this business in the first place, not for the money or prestige, but because it created places where people could make memories, where they could feel welcomed." "But what if I fail?" she whispered. "What if Patricia's right, and I only make things worse?" "Then we fail together," he responded. "But at least it will be failing while being who we really are. I don't want to spend the rest of my life pretending to be my father. I want to discover who I am, and I think I need your help to do that." It was the most honest declaration he had made to her, and Maria felt something in her chest open painfully. She was falling for him, deeper, faster, more dangerously. And the scariest thing of all was that he seemed to be falling too. The universe has a cruel way of testing our convictions just when we need them most. 3 days before the event, when all the hard work was reaching its culminating point, when vendors were finally coordinated and attendance confirmations exceeded expectations, nature decided to intervene. A tropical storm that wasn't forecasted suddenly formed in the ocean and headed directly toward the coast. Maria was in her office reviewing the last details when she heard the rumble of the first thunder. Through the window, she saw how the sky darkened with unnatural speed, black clouds rolling over themselves like something alive and furious. By the time she reached the hotel's basement, where they had been storing all the decorations, materials, and event preparations, water was already beginning to seep through the walls. "Shit!" she shouted, splashing in water that already reached her ankles. "We need to get everything out of here." The nearby staff rushed to help, but the storm intensified with wild speed. Rain pounded the basement windows like angry fists. The water was rising faster than they could work. Maria was knee-deep in cold water, desperately trying to save boxes of handmade decorations by local artisans who had worked for weeks, when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Santiago. He was soaked too, his expensive suit ruined, hair stuck to his forehead, but his eyes burned with determination. "Come on," he said, "all of us together. We can do this." And so, for the next 4 hours, under relentless rain and thunder that shook the building, a motley group of people worked side by side. Maria and Santiago, Rosa, who had come to the hotel to bring food for the team, Ricardo, the manager, Clara, the assistant. Even some hotel guests joined when they saw the chaos. They saved what they could, but much was lost. Wilted flowers, artists' posters ruined by water, food samples destroyed, hours of work reduced to soaked garbage. When the storm finally subsided near midnight, everyone was exhausted, sitting in the hotel lobby in soaked clothes, surrounded by wet boxes and partially drowned dreams. Maria looked at the disaster and felt everything falling apart. 3 days. They only had 3 days to rebuild everything. It was impossible. "I'm sorry," she said, the words coming out broken. "I'm so sorry. I should have anticipated this. I should have had a backup plan." "No one can foresee an unannounced tropical storm," Santiago said softly, sitting next to her on the cold marble floor. "Patricia was right," Maria continued, tears finally escaping. "I'm out of my league. I don't know what I'm doing, and now everything's ruined and it's my fault. Maria, look at me." She looked up, meeting his hazel eyes that shone with something intense and raw. "None of this is your fault. You know what I saw tonight? I saw a team that worked non-stop to save something they care about. I saw guests who don't even know us helping because your passion inspired them. I saw community. I saw purpose. I saw exactly what we're trying to create with this event. People coming together for something that matters." "But the event will happen anyway," he said firmly. "Maybe not exactly as we planned, but it will happen. And it will be beautiful because you made it possible." There was a moment of silence, only the sound of water dripping from their clothes and the distant echo of now soft rain. "I'm scared," Maria admitted quietly. "Scared of failing," Scared of disappointing everyone, scared of proving to you that Patricia was right about me. Santiago took her face in his hands, forcing her to look directly at him. Maria Elena Santos, you are the bravest person I know. You faced a world that told you that you didn't belong and said, "Watch me." You sacrificed your own dreams to make others' dreams come true. You see beauty where everyone else sees obstacles, and you made me— His voice broke slightly. You made me remember what it feels like to hope for something. What it feels like to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. His thumb gently brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear. You're not a failure, he continued. You're a miracle. My miracle. And no matter what happens in 3 days, that won't change. The world seemed to condense to that moment. Two soaked, exhausted, scared people, sitting on the floor of a hotel that might be about to collapse, surrounded by pulped dreams. But also two people who had found something unexpected in the midst of chaos. Hope, connection, maybe even love. I need to tell you something, Santiago said, his voice barely audible. Something I've been trying not to admit because it complicates everything even more. What? Maria whispered, her heart beating wildly. He began, but was interrupted by the sound of quick footsteps. Rosa appeared in the hallway, her face worried but determined. Girl, she called. I made some calls to the fishermen, the artisans, the musicians. I told them what happened. And? Rosa smiled, her eyes shining. And they all want to help. They'll work all night if necessary. They'll redo everything together. They said they won't let this fail. Not after someone finally saw them as important. Maria felt tears coming again, but this time from overwhelming gratitude. So, Rosa continued, extending her hand to help her up, stop feeling sorry for yourself and go thank your community, because that's what they are now, your community, your family. As Maria stood up, supported by Rosa on one side and Santiago on the other, she realized a fundamental truth. She had been so focused on not disappointing anyone else that she had forgotten the most important lesson. She wasn't alone in this. She never had been. The next 3 days were a blur of frantic activity. The community Maria had gathered came together in ways that exceeded all expectations. Fishermen working with hotel chefs to create a unique fusion menu. Artisans teaching staff traditional techniques. Musicians rehearsing with the hotel's sound equipment to create an experience that mixed modern with folkloric. And at the center of it all, Maria and Santiago worked side by side, their roles blurring until it was no longer clear who was the employer and who was the employee. They were simply two people fighting for something they both believed in. Patricia watched from a distance, her disapproval clear but contained. Valentina had disappeared after the storm, supposedly returning to the capital for urgent matters, but Maria suspected the woman had seen the writing on the wall. Whatever relationship she and Santiago had had was long over. The night before the event, when the ballroom was finally decorated and everything was in place, Maria allowed herself a moment to simply look at what they had created. The space was a perfect fusion of elegance and authenticity. Fishing nets transformed into decorative art, hanging from the ceiling with small LED lights that shone like stars. Tables dressed in white linen tablecloths, but centerpieces of local wildflowers in recycled glass bottles from fishermen. A stage for the musicians, with traditional instruments mixed with modern equipment. It was beautiful. It was real. It was everything she had imagined and more. It's perfect, said a voice behind her. She turned to find Santiago dressed casually in jeans and a simple shirt, so different from the suits he always wore. You think so? I know it, he responded, walking to stand beside her. Maria, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that what you did here, is already a success. You've changed the way I see my own business. You've changed the way I see myself. Santiago. Wait, he interrupted softly. Let me finish. The other night when the storm interrupted us, I was trying to tell you something, and I've been trying to find the right moment since then, but I think there will never be a right moment. So I'm going to say it now. He took both her hands in his. I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words coming out in a rush. I know it's complicated. I know you're technically my employee. I know we come from different worlds. I know I'm probably ruining everything by saying this right before the most important event of our lives, but I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is just professional respect or friendship. It's more, much more, and I needed you to know." Maria's heart was beating so loudly, she was sure the whole hotel could hear it. She had dreamed of this, of him feeling the same way she felt. But now that it was happening, all her courage seemed to have evaporated. "Me too," she finally whispered. "I'm falling in love with you too." The smile that lit up his face was like the sun coming out after a storm. Slowly, carefully, as if afraid of scaring her, he leaned in. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, full of question. But when she responded, tangling her fingers in his hair, something broke between them. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and longing pouring into that moment. When they finally separated, both breathing heavily, Santiago rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "I don't regret this. I don't regret you." "Me neither," Maria responded. "Never." And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms in that ballroom that represented all their dreams and fears mixed together, neither of them knew that tomorrow would bring not only the event they had worked so hard to create, but also tests that would push their emerging love and their convictions to the limit. Because true love, they would discover, isn't just about beautiful moments. It's about choosing to stay even when everything falls apart. It's about believing in each other when the world tells you to give up. And that test was only hours away. True success is not measured by applause, but by the lives we touch along the way. The night of the event arrived with a clear sky that seemed like nature's apology for the storm days earlier. The first stars were beginning to appear as guests arrived at the Grand Oceanic, their faces reflecting curiosity and expectation. Maria had put on a simple but elegant dress, borrowed from Rosa, who turned out to have a surprising past as a seamstress for society events before opening her restaurant, in navy blue that matched the ocean visible through the ballroom windows. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, some strands framing her nervous face. "Breathe," Santiago whispered in her ear when he found her checking the guest lists for the 10th time. "Everything is going to turn out perfectly." He looked different that night. Yes, he wore a suit, but a less formal one, more accessible. And in his eyes there was something new, peace, or at least the possibility of it. The first guests to arrive were, ironically, the ones Maria feared most, Patricia and a group of high-profile business people. Patricia wore an ivory evening gown that probably cost more than the event's complete budget, and her expression was one of barely contained skepticism. "Well," she said, looking around the decorated ballroom, "it's different." But before she could elaborate, something magical began to happen. The fishermen arrived, not in their work clothes but in modest yet dignified suits, accompanied by their families. The local artisans proudly wearing pieces of their own work, the folk musicians with instruments polished to a shine. And behind them, like a rising wave, came members of the community who had heard about the event. Small business owners, teachers, workers who were rarely invited to Grand Oceanic events. Maria had done something radical. She had reserved half the seats for the local community, offering them tickets at a symbolic price or free for those who couldn't afford it. The wealthy business people and potential sponsors were now mixing with real people, with real stories. "What is this?" Patricia hissed, pulling Santiago aside. "A charity case? Did you turn our gala event into a community party?" "I turned our event into something that matters," Santiago responded calmly. "Look around, Patricia. Really look." And there was something to see. The business people, initially disconcerted by the unusual mix of guests, were beginning to relax. A CEO of a tech company was fascinated listening to a 60-year-old fisherman talk about ocean currents and climate change. A real estate magnate was admiring the wood sculptures of a local artisan, asking about his creative process. The event officially began with Santiago taking the microphone. Maria, standing backstage, felt her stomach knot. "Good evening," he began, his voice clear but warm. "Thank you all for coming tonight, and when I say all, I mean it literally, because tonight is different from any event the Grand Oceanic has ever organized." He paused, his eyes finding Maria's for a brief second. For years, my father built this hotel on the foundation of excellence and service, but somewhere along the way, I think we lost sight of what truly makes a place excellent: the people. Not just the people who stay here, but the people who make it run. The people who fish the sea that feeds our restaurant. The people who create the art that decorates our walls. The people who make this city a home, not just a tourist destination. A murmur of surprise ran through the audience. This wasn't the usual corporate speech. Tonight, Santiago continued, isn't here to impress you with empty luxury. It's here to reconnect you with something real, to remind you why any of us does what we do, not to accumulate wealth or prestige, but to create meaning, to build community, to make the world a little better than we found it. He stepped down from the stage to stunned applause, and the folk band began to play. Music filled the ballroom, traditional rhythms mixed with modern arrangements that made even the stiffest business people begin to tap their feet. Then came dinner, and here Maria's vision truly shone. Instead of a pretentious menu served by formal waiters, they had created interactive stations where the fishermen themselves explained their catches of the day, where the hotel chef worked side by side with local cooks to prepare dishes that fused haute cuisine technique with traditional flavors. Maria watched everything from a corner, her heart overflowing with something like disbelief. It was working. Against all odds, it was really working. "You did it!" She turned to find Valentina standing behind her. Santiago's ex-girlfriend had returned, apparently, and her expression was complex, a mixture of admiration, jealousy, and something like sadness. "Valentina," Maria said cautiously, "I didn't know you'd come." "I almost didn't," the other woman admitted, "but curiosity got the better of me, and now I understand." "Understand what?" Valentina looked toward where Santiago was talking animatedly with a group that included both a banker and a fisherman. "Why he chose you. Why this works when everything I tried never did." She turned her gaze to Maria. "I always tried to make him more than he was, more sophisticated, more corporate, more successful by the world's standards. But you made him remember who he really was. You showed him he didn't have to choose between success and soul." "Valentina, I didn't—" "Don't apologize," the other woman interrupted with a sad smile. "You did what I never could. You loved him for who he is, not for who he could be. That's a rare gift." Before Maria could respond, a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. An older man, elegantly dressed but with a kind face weathered by the sun, was entering. Maria recognized him from photos in the files. Antonio Delgado, the international investor who had grown up in this very city before emigrating to Europe decades ago. Santiago hurried to greet him, but the man stopped him with a gesture. "No," Delgado said, his voice with an accent that mixed Spanish with Italian. "First, I want to experience this like any guest. I've heard interesting rumors about tonight, young Rivera. Very interesting." For the next 2 hours, Delgado toured the event. He spoke with the fishermen about techniques he remembered from his own childhood. He tasted every dish, his eyes closing with pleasure as he recognized flavors he hadn't experienced in 40 years. He listened to the musicians and, to everyone's surprise, joined them in a traditional song, his voice hoarse but full of emotion. Maria watched him, her hope growing with each smile on the older man's face. If anyone could save the Grand Oceanic, it was him. But then came the moment that would change everything. It was Patricia who unleashed the chaos, though probably without full intention of destroying everything. During the closing speech, when they were supposed to announce the funds raised for the Arts Foundation, Patricia went up on stage with a determined expression. She had drunk more wine than usual, and her carefully maintained social filter was slipping. "Before we end the night," she said, her voice too loud on the microphone, "I think everyone deserves to know the truth." Santiago went pale. Maria felt her stomach sink. "My brother," Patricia continued, "has been keeping a secret that affects everyone who works here, everyone who has invested in us, this entire community." "Patricia, don't," Santiago said, moving toward the stage, but she raised a hand to stop him. "The Grand Oceanic is on the verge of bankruptcy," she declared, the words falling like bombs in the now silent ballroom. We've been hiding massive debts for 3 years. This event, all this authenticity, wasn't just about reconnecting with the community. It was a desperate attempt to attract investors without having to admit how bad things really are. The silence was absolute. Then, like a breaking wave, the murmurs began. Faces that had been smiling moments before now showed shock, betrayal, fury. Maria watched everything they had worked for crumble in real time. The business people were already pulling out their phones, probably calling lawyers, or withdrawing any offers they had been considering. The community members looked hurt, as if this beautiful event had been just another manipulation by the rich. Santiago went up on stage, his face grey but his voice firm. "My sister is right," he said simply. "About the financial situation, we've been struggling, and yes, part of tonight's purpose was to try to save the hotel." The murmur grew louder, but he raised his voice. "But what Patricia didn't say, because maybe she doesn't see it, is that tonight was also about something else. It was about remembering why we started this in the first place. Not the money, not the prestige, but the desire to create a place where people could gather, where they could feel welcomed, where they could make memories." "Pretty words," someone shouted from the audience, "but you lied to us." "Yes," Santiago admitted. "I lied to you, by omission at least. And I'm sorry, I was ashamed, terrified. I felt like I was failing my father's legacy, this community, everyone who depended on me. So I hid the truth and hoped that somehow I could fix everything before anyone noticed." He stepped down from the stage and walked to the center of the ballroom, positioning himself between the two worlds that had converged that night. "But I met someone," he continued, his eyes finding Maria's, "who taught me that authenticity is more valuable than perfection, that people can forgive failure, but not falseness, that true community is built on honesty, not on facades." He turned, looking directly at Antonio Delgado. "Mr. Delgado, I know you came here tonight considering investing in us, and I would completely understand if after this revelation you decide we're too big a risk. But if you're willing to listen, I'd like to make you a proposal, not just to save the Grand Oceanic, but to transform it into something truly worth saving." Delgado stood slowly, his expression inscrutable. The entire ballroom held its breath. "Young Rivera," he finally said, "what kind of transformation do you have in mind?" Maria watched from the side, tears running down her face. Santiago was risking everything, choosing honesty over self-preservation. It was the bravest thing she had seen anyone do. "A chain of boutique hotels," Santiago said, "that celebrate the local culture of each region where we operate. That hire and train people from the community, not just for service jobs, but for management, design, every level of operation. That are places the locals are proud to have in their city, not resentful of how they displace or exploit their community." "Sounds expensive," Delgado observed, "and risky, and unlikely to generate the profit margins traditional investors would expect." "Yes," Santiago admitted, "to all of that, but it also sounds like something that matters, like something my father, who started with a small inn where he treated every guest like family, would have wanted me to do." Delgado walked forward, his shoes echoing on the silent marble floor. He stopped in front of Santiago, studying him with eyes that had seen decades of negotiations and broken promises. "And who would lead the creative side of this?" he asked. "Who would ensure that each hotel truly captured the spirit of its community?" Before Santiago could answer, Maria found her own voice. "I would," she said, walking forward, though her legs trembled. "If you'll have me." All eyes turned to her. Patricia laughed humorlessly from the stage. "You? A waitress with no degree, no credentials, no experience beyond one event?" "Yes," Maria responded, lifting her chin. "Me. Because I understand what it feels like to be ignored. I understand what it feels like to have a dream the world tells you is too big for you, and I understand, more than anyone in this room, what it means when someone finally gives you a chance to prove your worth." She turned to Delgado. "I don't have a fancy degree, but I have 8 years of experience making people feel important. I have contacts in communities that people like Patricia didn't even know existed, and I have a vision for how hospitality can be a force for elevation, not exploitation." "And I," added a voice from the audience. Rosa, the restaurant owner, stood up. I would teach her everything I know about running a small business with soul. And I, said one of the fishermen, I'd show her how traditions can coexist with modernity. One by one, community members stood up, offering their skills, their knowledge, their support. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Delgado watched them all, his expression softening. "Mr. Rivera," he finally said, "I've seen many pitches in my life. Polished presentations, impressive financial projections, promises of massive returns. And you know what? Most of them fail because they're built on nothing more than greed and ego." He paused, letting the tension build. "But this—" He looked around the ballroom at the hopeful, scared, authentic faces. "This is built on something real, on community, on purpose. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough." "So?" Santiago asked, barely daring to breathe. "So," Delgado said with a slow smile, "I think we have a lot to talk about, but not tonight. Tonight, let's finish this celebration the right way, and tomorrow we start building something that will last longer than any of us." The relief that flooded the ballroom was palpable. It wasn't a definitive yes, but it was hope. It was possibility. And for Maria and Santiago, it was an opportunity to prove that love, both romantic and love for community, could be the foundation on which to build something lasting. But as they would discover in the following days, the best opportunities often come with the most difficult decisions. The weeks following the event were a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and revelations. Antonio Delgado was a man of his word, but also a businessman. His offer was generous but came with conditions: massive investment in exchange for partial operational control, a 5-year restructuring plan, and, the most difficult point, that both Santiago and Maria commit full-time to the project, which would mean constant travel to different cities to establish the new boutique hotels. "It's an incredible opportunity," Santiago said one rainy afternoon in his office, now filled with architectural plans and design proposals. "Exactly what we wanted. So why do I feel so conflicted?" Maria was sitting by the window, watching the rain hit the glass. They had been officially a couple for 3 weeks, but between the chaos of the deal with Delgado, they had barely had time for themselves. "Because," she said slowly, "success sometimes looks suspiciously like the trap we just escaped from." Santiago turned to look at her, surprised by her insight. "Explain." "You got into the hotel business because you felt you had to keep your father's legacy alive," Maria said. "And in the process, you lost sight of who you were, your own passion for architecture, your own dream. And now we have this incredible opportunity. But if we're not careful, we could lose ourselves in it the same way. Are you saying we shouldn't accept?" "No," she responded quickly. "I'm saying we need to be honest about what this would mean: constant travel, long separations, little time for us, to build whatever this is between us." Santiago approached, kneeling in front of her and taking her hands. "Maria, what do you want? In the midst of all this, with all these offers and opportunities, what does Maria Elena Santos want for her own life?" Tears stung her eyes because no one in her entire life had asked her that in that way, as if her answer mattered more than any business plan or financial projection. "I want," she began, her voice trembling, "to study interior design. I want to learn the theory behind what I've been doing instinctively. I want to be really good at this, not just lucky or instinctive." "Then do it," he said simply. "But the project can wait 6 months, a year if necessary. Maria Delgado was impressed by you. He's not going anywhere, and if he does, then it wasn't the right partnership anyway." She shook her head, frustrated. "It doesn't work that way, Santiago. You know it doesn't. Opportunities like this don't wait. If I say no now, if I ask for time, he'll find someone else. And you'll lose everything." "I won't lose everything," he corrected softly. "Not if I have you, and not if I've finally learned the lesson you've been trying to teach me. That success without soul is just another kind of failure." It was in that moment that Rosa chose to appear at the door, knocking gently before entering with a tray of coffee and cookies. The older woman had been coming to the hotel frequently since the event, apparently self-appointing herself as the unofficial guardian of Maria's emotional well-being. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, though she clearly wasn't. "But I heard enough from outside to butt in." "Rosa," Maria began. "No, listen to me." The older woman set down the tray and sat without being invited. 30 years ago I was offered a similar opportunity, a restaurant in the capital backed by important investors, the chance to become a recognized name. I turned it down. "Why?" Santiago asked. "Because I had just had my daughter, and my husband was sick, and I thought family was more important than success. And I don't regret that decision. My daughter grew up with a present mother. My husband had his last years surrounded by love. But—" She paused, her expression becoming melancholic. "I also wonder, sometimes, on quiet nights, what would have happened if I had said yes." "You're saying I should accept," Maria said. "I'm saying," Rosa corrected, "that any decision you make will come with a price. The question isn't avoiding paying a price, but choosing what price you're willing to pay, and making sure what you get in return is worth that cost." After Rosa left, Maria and Santiago sat in silence for a long while. "I have an idea," Santiago finally said. "What if we do this differently? What if we tell Delgado yes, but negotiate different terms? You start your studies here, at the local university. I handle the restructuring of the Grand Oceanic as a pilot. And then, when you're ready, when we're both ready, we expand together." "That could take years," Maria pointed out. "He might get impatient. Then we'll find someone else, or we'll do it ourselves more slowly. Maria, I've spent 3 years chasing another man's dream. I'm not going to spend the next 30 chasing a version of my own dream that leaves me empty again." It was the most romantic and most terrifying thing anyone had said for her, because it meant he was willing to risk his financial future for her happiness, and that was a weight she wasn't sure how to carry. The answer to how to proceed came from an unexpected place: Patricia. Santiago's sister had been unusually quiet since the night of the event, avoiding both her brother and Maria, but one afternoon she appeared at Maria's small apartment without warning. "Can we talk?" she asked, looking uncomfortable in her elegant outfit in the midst of the modest building. Maria, surprised but curious, let her in. Patricia looked around the one-bedroom apartment, the cracked walls that Maria had covered with colorful fabrics bought at the market, the second-hand furniture, the interior design brochure still on the table. Her expression was difficult to read. "I came to apologize," she finally said, the words clearly costing her effort, "and to explain." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Patricia interrupted. "I've been horrible to you, dismissive, condescending, deliberately cruel, and you deserve to know why." She sat on the worn sofa, her perfectly manicured hands twisting in her lap. "When my father died," she began, "he made me a promise too. He told me he would make me an equal partner in the business, that my voice would matter, that I wouldn't just be the little daughter who organized pretty events while her older brother made the real decisions." "But Santiago—" "Santiago didn't know," Patricia continued. "Dad never told him. And when he died before updating his will, everything went to Santiago. Legally, morally, he was the heir. And I was just the employee." Maria began to understand. "So when you appeared, Patricia said, finally meeting her gaze, "you weren't just another threat to Santiago's position. You were a threat to my own relevance. Because if he was willing to listen to a waitress with no experience over his own sister who had worked in the business for years, then what did that say about my value?" "Patricia, that doesn't—" "Let me finish," the other woman asked. "Because there's more. The night of the event, when I revealed the financial difficulties, it wasn't an accident or drunkenness. It was deliberate. I thought if I exposed the truth, if I made Santiago look incompetent publicly, maybe Delgado would want to deal with me instead. Maybe I'd finally be recognized as the leader I deserved to be." "And what happened?" Patricia laughed humorlessly. "Delgado called me the next day. He told me what I had done demonstrated I was an excellent operational manager, the position I deserved, but lacked the vision and integrity needed for leadership. He offered me a position as COO in the project, if I could let go of my ego and work as part of a team." "And did you accept?" "I still haven't answered," Patricia admitted, Because first I needed to do this, I needed to apologize to you, to Santiago, and admit that my own fear and insecurity almost destroyed something beautiful. Maria sat beside her, considering her words carefully. I understand feeling invisible, she finally said, feeling like you don't matter, that your contributions aren't valued. But Patricia, the answer isn't tearing other people down. It's building yourself up in ways that make it impossible to ignore you. Like you did. Like I tried to do, Maria corrected, and I'm still trying. Every day. Patricia nodded slowly. There's something else you should know. About Valentina. What about her? The reason she left Santiago 5 years ago, it was because of me. I told her he would never be strong enough to stand up to our father, to make his own decisions. I convinced her she'd be better off with someone more independent, because I didn't want to share influence over my brother with anyone. Maria felt a wave of compassion for Santiago, manipulated by people who claimed to love him. Why are you telling me all this? Because, Patricia said, looking at her directly, you're going to have to make a decision soon, about the project with Delgado, about your education, about Santiago, and I don't want you to make mistakes based on incomplete information. I don't want you to lose years of your life to other people's power games. She stood up, preparing to leave. Delgado is impressed with you, Maria, but he's also pragmatic. If you turn down his offer, he'll find someone else, and that person might not have your vision, but they'll have credentials and immediate availability. It's your choice, but make it knowing all the facts. After Patricia left, Maria sat in her apartment for hours, processing everything. The truth was she was afraid of accepting and losing herself in others' success, afraid of refusing and losing the opportunity of her life, afraid of choosing Santiago and discovering that love wasn't enough to pay rent and her dreams. But as she looked around her small apartment, at the life she had built with her own hands through years of hard work, she realized something fundamental. She had already proven her ability to survive. The question now was whether she had the courage to truly live. Maria spent the night awake, scribbling in her notebook until dawn light began filtering through her window. By the time the sun rose, she had a plan. Not a perfect plan, but one that felt honest. She called Santiago and asked him to arrange a meeting with Delgado for that afternoon. Then she made a series of calls, to Rosa, to some of the artisans and fishermen from the event, and finally to the local university. The meeting was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon at the Grand Oceanic. When Maria arrived, she found Santiago, Patricia, Delgado, and surprisingly, Valentina. Valentina is here as a potential consultant, Delgado explained. If we move forward with this project, we'll need professional event experience in addition to creative vision. Maria nodded. It made sense, though it still felt strange. Mr. Delgado, Maria began, her voice clear despite her nerves, I deeply appreciate your offer, but before I give an answer, I'd like to present a counter-proposal. Delgado raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I'm listening. Maria unfolded several papers on the conference table. I accept the position of creative director, but with modifications to the timeline. I propose a 2-year pilot program structured like this. Year 1. I enroll in the interior design program at the local university while working part-time from here, helping to restructure the Grand Oceanic as a model. Meanwhile, we establish a training program where we train people from the local community in every aspect of hotel management, from housekeeping to administration. Year 2. With my degree in progress and a trained team at the Grand Oceanic, we begin to expand. But instead of me traveling constantly, the team trained here becomes the leaders of the new projects. I oversee creatively and visit regularly, but they are the local experts who truly understand their communities. And after 2 years? Delgado asked. After 2 years, Maria continued, I have my degree, we have a proven model of community development, and I can expand my role if it makes sense. Or maybe we discover this model works better if I'm a consultant who empowers local teams instead of an executive constantly flying between cities. It's unconventional, Delgado admitted. I know, Maria said, but this entire initiative is unconventional. And I think if we truly want each hotel to be authentically local, it can't be run by the same two people flying around imposing a vision. It has to be organic, developed by people who actually live in those communities. Santiago was smiling, pride evident in his eyes. Patricia looked thoughtful. Valentina, surprisingly, nodded in approval. "There's something else," Maria added. "I've already spoken with the university. They're interested in establishing a formal partnership with this project. Students in design, hospitality, and business could do internships with us. In return, we get access to their research on sustainable tourism and community development. It's mutually beneficial and reinforces our commitment to education." Delgado leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed respect. "How you put all this together last night? The best ideas come when you're desperate," Maria responded with a small smile. "And I was pretty desperate to find a way not to have to choose between my dreams and others." "I have a question," Patricia intervened unexpectedly. "In this plan, where do I fit?" Maria had been expecting this. "I propose you be COO, as Delgado suggested, but with a specific distinction. You would be responsible for creating the operational systems that make this model replicable, documenting what works here so it can be adapted elsewhere. Basically translating vision into sustainable processes." Patricia considered this, then nodded slowly. "That could work." "And me?" Valentina asked with an ironic smile. "Since we're defining roles, you," Maria said honestly, "have experience none of us have. If you're willing, I'd love for you to mentor the local teams in high-level event planning, not to replace their authenticity, but to teach them how to present it in ways that impress both heart and wallet." Valentina looked at Santiago, then back at Maria. "You know I still have feelings for him, right?" she said bluntly. "I know," Maria responded calmly, "but I also know that feelings alone don't make a relationship. You need shared vision, mutual respect, and willingness to grow together. And I think Santiago and I have that. But if you want to work with us professionally, I think we can all be adult enough to separate personal from professional." Valentina laughed genuinely. "I like you," she said. "I didn't want to like you, but I do. And you're right, Santiago needs someone like you, not someone like me. So yes, I accept the mentor role, but only if you promise never to make me as healthy and mature as you are." The tension in the room dissolved into laughter. Delgado stood walking to the window overlooking the ocean. The silence stretched as he thought, each second feeling like an eternity. "Miss Santos," he finally said, "your plan has holes. It's ambitious to the point of being almost naive, and we'll probably find 1,000 problems you didn't anticipate." Maria's heart sank. "But," Delgado continued, turning with a smile, "it's also brilliant. It's exactly the kind of unconventional thinking this project needs, and it demonstrates something no professional presentation could, that you truly believe in this, that you're not here for prestige or salary, but because you see an opportunity to create real change. So I accept your counter-proposal," he said, "with one condition." "What?" "That after completing your degree, you write a book about this model. How we create hospitality that elevates instead of exploits, because if this works, and I think it will, other people will need to learn from it." Maria felt tears threatening. "I can do that," she whispered. "Good," Delgado said, extending his hand. "Then we have a deal. Welcome to the team, Creative Director Santos." As Maria shook his hand, she felt the weight and promise of that title. It wasn't just a job, it was a statement that she, a waitress from a small seaside restaurant, had as much right to shape the future as anyone with impressive credentials. But most importantly, it was a statement that dreams don't have to be mutually exclusive, that you could pursue success without sacrificing your soul, that you could love someone without losing yourself, that you could build something meaningful while still learning and growing. That night, when everyone had left and only she and Santiago remained in his office, he hugged her tightly. "You did it," he murmured against her hair. "You really did it." "We did it," she corrected, "together." And for the first time in her life, Maria felt she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The following months were a whirlwind of transformation, both personal and professional. Maria started her classes in September, joining students 10 years younger than her. At first, she felt out of place, the only student who arrived at class with hands still smelling slightly of coffee from the morning shift she still fulfilled some days at Rosa's restaurant. But she quickly discovered that her practical experience gave her a perspective her younger classmates lacked. "It's fascinating," she told Santiago one night as they studied together in her apartment. She with color theory books and he with financial projections. How everything I've been doing instinctively has names and principles. It's like I've been speaking a language my whole life without knowing its grammar. Santiago smiled, watching her as she scribbled notes in the margins of her textbooks. "You know what I love most about you?" he said suddenly. She looked up, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "What?" "That you never stop growing, you never settle. Even when you finally get something you've wanted for years, you immediately start asking how you can do it better, learn more, go deeper." Maria felt her cheeks warm. "Sometimes I wonder if it's a flaw. If maybe I'll never be satisfied." "It's not a flaw," he said, getting up to sit beside her. "It's a gift. And it makes me want to be better too." And he was. Santiago had started taking night classes in architecture, something he had abandoned when his father died, not with the intention of changing careers, but simply to reconnect with the passion he had left behind. Meanwhile, the Grand Oceanic was being transformed, not with massive, expensive renovations, but with careful and meaningful changes. They hired 10 people from the local community for a 1-year training program, teaching them every aspect of the hotel business. Among them was the son of one of the fishermen, a young single mother who had been cleaning rooms in chain hotels for years without opportunity to advance, and a veteran who had struggled to find employment. Rosa supervised the new culinary program, working with the hotel chef to create a menu that honored both local cuisine and haute gastronomy techniques. Her daughter, whom Maria finally met, turned out to be an accountant and joined the team to help with the financial transparency the new model required. Patricia, to many people's surprise, flourished in her role as COO. It turned out that when her need for control was productively channeled, she was incredibly effective. She created manuals, systems, processes that made it possible to replicate the model without losing local authenticity. And slowly, very slowly, she and Maria developed something like friendship, built on mutual respect, if not genuine warmth. Valentina came once a month for mentoring sessions, and while it was sometimes awkward, especially when Maria noticed how the other woman's eyes still lingered on Santiago, it was professional. More than that, she was generous with her knowledge, genuinely investing in the project's success. But not everything was perfect. There were moments of doubt, of exhaustion, of wondering if they were trying too much. One night, 3 months after the program started, Maria had a crisis. It was midnight, and she had been working on an essay about design theory after a full shift at the hotel, and she just broke. Santiago found her crying in her apartment bathroom, surrounded by books and notes, her face stained with makeup and tears. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "It's too much. Work, school, the project, trying to be good at everything. I'm a mess. I'm going to fail at everything." He sat on the floor beside her, not caring that the bathroom was tiny or that his knees pressed uncomfortably against the bathtub. "Maria, look at me." She shook her head, embarrassed by her breakdown. "Look at me," he repeated softly, taking her face in his hands. "Do you remember what you told me the night of the storm? That true love is choosing to stay even when everything is hard. Well, this is that. This is the hard moment. And here I am, choosing you anyway. But I'm failing." "You're not failing," he interrupted. "You're being human. You're doing a full-time job, studying full-time, and launching a revolutionary project. You know what person could do all that perfectly? None, because that's impossible." "Then what do I do?" "You do what you've always done," he said. "You ask for help, you delegate, you trust your team. Maria, you don't have to do everything yourself. In fact, part of this entire project is about demonstrating that when we empower others, we all rise together." He was right, of course. She had been so focused on proving her worth that she had forgotten the fundamental lesson of what they were building. Community means supporting each other. The next day, she had an honest meeting with her team at the hotel, admitting she was overwhelmed. The response was immediate. They offered to redistribute responsibilities, create backup systems, make sure no one person carried too much weight. And with her professor at the university, she was equally honest about her circumstances. To her surprise, the professor, a 50-year-old woman who had returned to academia after years in the industry, was incredibly understanding. "Maria," the professor said, "half of education is about information, the other half is about learning to navigate the real world while applying that knowledge. You're already doing that. So let's work together to find a way to structure your assignments that serves both your learning and your real project." Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. Not perfectly, not without struggles, but manageably. By December, 3 months after starting the training program, they had their first graduation. 2 team members had completed enough training to be promoted to supervisory roles. The ceremony was small, just the team and some families, but it was one of the most emotional moments of Maria's life. "You made this possible," said one of the graduates, a 45-year-old man who had been unemployed for 2 years before joining the program. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. You saw me as a person with potential, not just as a problem." That night, as Maria and Santiago walked along the beach near the hotel, she stopped and looked at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how a year ago my biggest life was serving coffee and dreaming about going to college someday. And now I'm living a life I didn't even know was possible to dream. Do you regret anything?" She considered the question honestly. "I wish I had started earlier," she admitted. "But then maybe I needed those 8 years working in the restaurant to truly appreciate this, to understand what it feels like to be stuck, so I could create opportunities for others who feel that way." "And us?" he asked softly. "Any regrets about us?" Maria turned to look at him, this man she had spilled coffee on barely 6 months ago, who had given her a chance when no one else would, who loved her not despite her imperfections, but including them. "Not one," she said, and stood on tiptoe to kiss him as the waves whispered approval behind them. True love is not finding someone perfect, but building something beautiful with someone imperfect. 2 years after the event that changed everything, Maria stood in the same Grand Oceanic ballroom, but this time as a graduate interior designer and official creative director of the Rivera Delgado network. It was the inauguration of the second boutique hotel in the project, located in a coastal city 3 hours away. The team that had transformed it was composed of 80% local people who had been trained under the model developed at the Grand Oceanic. Santiago was beside her, his hand finding hers naturally as they watched the ballroom filled with guests. Unlike the first event 2 years ago, this didn't have the tension of desperate survival. Instead, there was genuine joy, celebration of real achievements. The Grand Oceanic had survived. More than survive, it was thriving. It didn't generate the obscene profits of impersonal corporate hotels, but it was profitable and sustainable. More importantly, it had become an integral part of its community instead of a separate entity from it. Patricia was there with her new partner, a local architect she had met during one of the renovation projects. It turned out that vulnerability and failure had taught Patricia things success never could: humility, empathy, the ability to see value in people who didn't look like her. Rosa had closed her small restaurant to attend, bringing all her staff. Her daughter was pregnant, making her a grandmother, and Rosa radiated happiness. Even Valentina had come, now fully invested in the project not as a hurt ex-girlfriend, but as a proud mentor. She had brought her own new boyfriend, a chef she was considering opening a restaurant with. And there was Delgado himself, now 75 years old, still vibrant, playing chess with one of the first graduates of the training program, who was now general manager of one of the hotels. Maria, now 37 years old, was 5 months pregnant. It had been a surprise, but a welcome one. Santiago, 43, practically glowed with happiness every time he looked at her growing belly. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping her in his arms from behind as they watched their friends and family. "About how 5 years ago I was sure my life would never change," she admitted, "that I would die serving coffee, having never achieved any of my dreams. And now Now I have more than I ever dared to dream. Any regrets? It was their favorite question, one they asked each other regularly, a check-in to make sure they were still on the right path. Only one, she said, turning in his arms to look at him, that I didn't spill that coffee on you sooner. He laughed, kissing her forehead. Then I guess we should be grateful for the universe's timing, because I think we both needed to be exactly who we were in that moment to appreciate what we have now. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Maria thought about the journey that had brought them here. It hadn't been easy. There had been struggles, doubts, moments of wanting to give up. But every obstacle had made them stronger. Every challenge had taught them something vital. Every failure had pushed them towards success in ways they never would have found through an easier path. And now, standing here with their friends and family, with a child on the way and dreams still expanding, Maria finally understood the most fundamental truth of all. True love, for another person, for your work, for yourself, isn't about finding perfection. It's about embracing the imperfect beauty of real life. It's about building something meaningful, stone by stone, choice by choice, day by day. It's about spilling coffee on strangers and turning accidents into beginnings. It's about asking for help and offering it freely. It's about believing you're enough exactly as you are, while simultaneously striving to be better. It's about loving deeply, working hard, dreaming big, and never forgetting where you come from and the people who helped you get to where you are. And as Santiago rested his hand on her belly, feeling the life growing inside her, Maria made a silent promise to her unborn child. I will teach you to dream, but I'll also teach you to work. I'll show you that true love is both comfortable and challenging, both safe and adventurous. I'll raise you knowing that your value doesn't come from titles or money, but from how you treat people, how you contribute to your community, how you get up after every fall. And above all, I'll teach you that accidents are sometimes the beginning of the best journeys. That spilling coffee on a stranger could change your entire life. That love comes when you least expect it and in the most unexpected ways. That you, my love, are living proof that real miracles don't happen with magic, but with choice, with courage, with the willingness to believe that something better is possible and then do the hard work of building it. The ocean whispered its eternal agreement, the waves kissing the beach in a rhythm that had seen civilizations born and die, that had witnessed countless stories of love and loss, of dreams and realities. And in this perfect and imperfect moment, under this sky painted with promises, with the love of her life holding her close and her future growing inside her, Maria Elena Santos, former waitress, student, creative director, relentless dreamer, was finally completely, perfectly home. Not in a place, but in a life she had built with her own hands, her own heart, and the invaluable help of a community that had believed in her when she didn't even dare to believe in herself. And that, she thought, as the sun sank into the horizon and the first stars began to appear, was the real definition of success. Not how much you have, but how much you've grown. Not where you end up, but who you become on the journey. Not what you achieve alone, but what you build together with others. True love, true dreams, true life, all beginning with a simple moment of grace after a clumsy accident on a spring morning 5 years ago. A moment that had taught her the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, the most beautiful things in life begin with a mess. You just have to have the courage to stay and see what builds from the ruins.